Hey everybody, it's Mariana again, covering for Martin, who is otherwise indisposed. So I thought I would step in and tell y'all about what makes me happy. So, for those of you who don't know, I'm a classically trained singer. I've been taking lessons for about 10 years now, and have been really seriously starting to devote a lot of time to singing in the last year or two and start pursuing it more professionally. Singing, I mean, I'm also a professional voice actress, and I've been in stuff, and you can look it up if you actually care. If you don't, then more power to you. And when I graduated high school, I was sort of at this crossroads where I was like, well, I really, really enjoy music and I really, really enjoy singing, but I just don't know what to do. Whereas with acting, I had this clear idea because I'd been talking to other actors, and I knew other actors, and they had given me advice on what to do and where to go, and I was like, all right, I actually know what I'm doing, as opposed to singing, which is like, it's all very, there's no actual set path, especially, and when I had graduated high school, I was approaching music more from like this pop singer approach, or like this pop singer mentality where I was like, okay, well, I need to join a band, or I need to get discovered, or I need to write my own music and stuff like that, and I'm just not very good at that. And also, I just didn't want to do, there's so much legwork involved in being a new band and getting your name out there and having people listen to your music and all this other stuff, and it's a lot of hard work and a lot of dirty work, and it's great if anybody can fucking put up with that, like, schlep, then good on you. But I was definitely not one of those people. So I started doing voiceover because that was the easier way out, I guess. That sounds really asinine, but it was. And I pushed singing off to the side, and I started, you know, booking voiceover work and stuff like that. And then things stagnated. I went to Europe and got attacked, and I came back here, and I was trying to find ways to keep myself from having free time. So I'd, you know, try and do as much stuff as I possibly could. So I started taking German, and I started singing, or I started taking voice lessons again here in LA. And there were, like, that was when I really first started learning operatic repertoire. Repertoire is like songs that all the different arias or songs that they sing in opera. So I started learning operatic repertoire, and I don't know. It was something completely different. Like, I had been singing classically before, and singing songs from like musicals or whatever, as well as like pop music and choral arrangements and everything. And there's something completely different between that and singing the operatic repertoire, because the operatic repertoire is so much more difficult but expressive but familiar, because there's a lot of opera makes its way into pop culture and we don't even realize it. Like, I mean, the Figaro, 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 like that's from the Barber of Seville, and there's so many. I just saw the Barber of Seville a couple weeks ago at the LA Opera, and it was crazy. I felt like the overture started, and I felt like I was watching an episode of Looney Tunes, because so much of that is from like commercials or Looney Tunes, or just all of this stuff. All of this classical music bleeds into pop culture, so it's familiar, but at the same time completely different from anything that we may normally find ourselves listening to or singing. And like, there was just something, whenever I would sing that stuff, there was just something about it that was really comforting and empowering, because when you're singing like a high C above the staff, ain't nobody gonna fuck with you. I don't know. I felt like, you know, I have a naturally like a very large voice. It's especially near the top, it's very like, I guess piercing? I don't know if that would be a good word. Trumpety, as my coach would say. It's very trumpety. And you know, when you have like this huge noise emitting from you, I feel like I could like punch a bear with my fucking mouth and it would die, because I'm that awesome at punching bears vocally. I don't know. This is a strange metaphor. But when I started singing that stuff, I was like, this is great. And I did actually, I wanted to try pursuing it. But unfortunately, it's not a poor man's, it's not something that poor people can do very easily. So, and at the time I was flat broke. So I had to step away. But I also was working at a karaoke bar at the time, and like right around then, when I started singing more and more, like that's when I started feeling less and less depressed. Like I started feeling more at home. And when I had like started humoring the idea of being a musician instead of any other idea I might have had, that's when I started coming more to terms, feeling more at peace with myself, and stuff like that. You know, fast forward a few years, because you know, irrelevant shit happened, and I started taking voice lessons again. I don't know, maybe oh no, I remember why. I had my voice was completely gone. I had started this cardio regimen, and it made my voice, it wrecked my voice. I literally could not sing. So, and I couldn't breathe either. And I found out it was because the way that you breathe when you're doing cardio work is different from the way that you breathe when you sing. And so my lungs were not used to this different way of breathing, and I felt like I was suffocating all the time. So I started taking voice lessons, and like I immediately felt 12,000 million times better. But that's when after I had rebuilt my voice back up from nothing, that's when I started really developing into this larger voice, because I started taking a few more risks with repertoire, and that's when people started hearing different things in my voice, and people started getting excited about what potentially I could do if I were released upon the opera world. And it was great having like people be interested in what I was doing, and being interested in helping me with a career. And so that's when I started really focusing on seriously pursuing opera specifically as some sort of a career option, or even just a work option. Like I said, I have a big voice, and but the aside from like people being excited about the voice itself, people were excited about the way that I looked, which was different, because like when I first started trying to act, I tried on camera and I tried theater, and people would always like brush me over because since I was like 14, I've been 6 feet tall. And that's only a mild exaggeration. I am 6 feet tall now, and my lightest was like 180, 200 pounds. I'm not a small person, and that's always been like a point of like, I don't know, it's always been like a little annoying thing in the back of my mind. Like, I mean, part of me really relishes in being tall and being this sort of larger than life presence, because it it keeps me from being taken advantage of at the very least. But it was very frustrating trying to figure out what sort of performing niche I fit into, because I don't fit into anything literally that anyone else does, because I'm just bigger. I'm a big person. And so I thought voiceover would be it. But when I started talking to people in the operatic community, they would always cite my stature. Like, there was one time where I had like this moment of like, this sort of like moment of like, okay, maybe this is it, where I went into a master class that my coach was teaching, and she had asked me to sing. So she presented me in front of this group of people for this class, and they were like, look at this woman, what do you think she sings? And they said Wagner, and they were right. And Wagner is like, he's the guy that does the Ride of the Valkyries. Like, he's known for this like huge productions with these huge orchestras, and most of all the women with like the horned Viking helmets and the big boobs, and they're fat and they're just like raw and all that shit. Like, that's Wagner. And I do sing Wagner, and it's very comfortable for me. But they knew that without me even opening my voice or singing anything, and it was because of the way that I looked. And there was just something really cool about that, like being scrutinized, but not in a negative way, but in a more analytical way. Because if any of you have ever spent any time around singers or musicians or anything like that, they'll refer to the voice as an instrument. And I always thought they were referring to specifically the voice as the instrument. But now that I've like sort of, I don't know, delved into the depths of the, I don't fucking know. Now that I've been in this scene a little bit longer, I understand that they don't just mean the throat, they mean like literally the entire body. Everything about the way that I'm put together determines how I sound. And there's something really comforting in that, because I know that no matter what I do, the parts are there, you know, and I was built for this. And this is the way I'm supposed to be, as opposed to feeling terrible for not having a strong profile, or not having, like, not being thin, or not fitting into some other, you know, somebody else's idea of what I should be. If people are scrutinizing me, it used to be like, oh, well, she has a double chin, or oh, she's got a belly, whatever. And now it's like, well, you know, I mean, if you take a look, I'm not sure if you can see very well, but I have a very, like, soft jawline. I don't have much definition here because my neck comes out from here. And that's not, I mean, sure, some of it's fat, but this is like pretty solid if you actually were to feel around. Please don't touch my chin, that would be weird. But if you were to actually feel around, there's, you know, it's solid. There's not much I can do to fix this problem. And I've always had a thick neck, even when I was thinner. And I've sort of lamented it half-jokingly to other singers, and they'd be like, well, if you changed that, then you would sound completely different. And I didn't and like, you know, I kind of had this moment where I was like, oh shit, you know, you're fucking right. Like, what would I sound like if this entire chamber, or this entire, like, area of where the sound is created, practically, what if that was changed? Like, why would I ever want to change that? And the same with, like, you know, same with my build. Like, I mean, so many other singers that are singing the same sorts of music that I'm going to be soon, or, you know, in the next couple of years, because right now I'm still young. I'm still young to many people in the community, and especially for people in my sort of voice range or voice type. They don't start getting into the really beefy stuff until they're like 30s or late 30s, early, or in their 30s or 40s. And so I have a lot of development to go through. But going through and finding other singers that are in my potential range, or in my potential, the Fach is what it's called, like the voice type. Finding other women like that, I'm seeing this pattern of like they're all huge. They just, like Jessie Norman, who is this prominent, very skilled African-American opera singer. She's like 6'4" and 400 pounds. She's enormous in a good way, because the way that her body is, it acts as this huge like chamber for resonance. And same with like Deborah Voigt, who was a very popular dramatic soprano from like, I think 10, 20 years ago. I was looking at a video that she had, or that somebody had posted of her performing, and ironically, like, I went and I read all the comments, and so many people were lamenting the fact that she had gotten a gastric bypass and lost a bunch of weight, because now her voice was completely different. And, you know, obviously there's nothing wrong with taking whatever steps you personally feel like you have to in order to feel healthy. But it's knowing that I sound the way that I do, and knowing that if I were to lose a dramatic amount of weight, especially in a short period of time, that it could potentially hurt me and like permanently change something that I think, and that, you know, some people think is a great part of me. It makes me feel a little, not that I should even feel bad about the way that I look. You know, I'm very strong. I work out regularly. I'm just am the way that I am. But it doesn't make me feel guilty for the way that I am and the way that I look, because I know that I am the way that I'm supposed to be right now. And some of you may be watching this and being like, why the fuck are you talking about this shit? I don't care about opera. This is lame. I'm gonna go watch cat videos. And I say, more power to you. But I mean, part of the reason why I'm sure some of you are watching these videos is to find out why we enjoy the things that we do, and maybe even to try some of these things for yourself. And not that I'm saying that everyone should go and sing opera, because obviously not everybody can. It's very difficult, and some people can't sing at all or whatever, and that's fine. But part of the reason why I mentioned it is because, like, it's given me this new level of acceptance about myself physically. And body image is something that's very, or like insecurities about body image is something that's very prominent in like men, women, whatever, everything in between. And it doesn't even have to be about body image, but just about like your own self-worth or something like that. And while your thing that you may potentially find about yourself that you're really good at, and that makes you feel good, and makes you feel like you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, and makes you feel like you're worthy of whatever the fuck you get for it. It might not be opera, but it might be something else. And there is something out there for you that is, that will make you feel that way. And while it might not even be something creative, it could be something like mathematical, or it could be something scientific, or it could be something like, I don't know, pooping. But it like, there's something out there for everybody. There's something that every single person is good at, regardless of what it is. And you can find that sort of acceptance within yourself if you just keep looking for whatever that is. So follow your guts, try and find it. Find your opera. You can do it. There's a lot of people who don't get along with their families very well. And family is supposed to be one of those things that you just are accepted for who you are and loved unconditionally, and familial relationships are supposed to be, in a perfect world, uncomplicated, and there are so many people, including myself, where they don't feel that way. And you know, I just thought I would share my experience with my family, and I mean, it might be hard to relate to or understand entirely, but you know, you're not alone in not exactly always feeling particularly loved or cared for or whatever by family members. And family members can be the worst, the best and the worst things in the world, because they're the people who can help us, or they're the people who can hurt us the most. And it's a tough situation to be in. I mean, personally, when it comes to my family life, maybe from the outside, it's not that. People might look at me and assume certain things about me. You know, I'm a white, cis female, and I grew up in a, middle-class, suburban family, which, you know, it is what it is. But there were a lot of complications within that upbringing, specifically in relation to who we allowed in the house. When I was younger, I always wanted a sibling. I'm an only child, and I always wanted an older sibling. And so my mom, eventually, when I was like 4, signed us up for foster care, which is where, you know, kids from other families come in and out of other people's homes and are cared for by the foster parents. So my mom signed us up for foster care, and my mom is one of those types of people who, if she sees a litter of puppies, she will take the runt. Always. I'm sure you've seen in the other videos, you've seen Meatball. Meatball was the runt of that litter. He was a ratty little monster. But anyway, we're not talking about my cat. So she would always pick, I think she kind of was like, I want to help the troubled kids who have a hard time finding foster homes and finding families, because everybody, when they go in to adopt or, you know, take care of foster children, they always want the babies. They don't want anything older than that. So, because there's too many variables once a child gets older. And, you know, it's not something I can particularly blame them for, but it is. There are a lot of kids who need families. So we ended up getting children all the time. Like, we would get kids in and out of the house. I mean, we were a part of the foster care program for, I don't know, 5 or 6 years, actively. So we would have children, and this was from like when I was 4 to 10 or something like that, and we would have children coming in and out of the house all the time, and they would stay anywhere from like, the foster sister that we ended up getting, she stayed for 12 years, and then we would have some kids stay for a month, and then we would even have a few kids stay for 2 days. So there was a lot of coming and going, and I sort of got used to this idea that anyone that I would meet in any situation, family or otherwise, would eventually be gone. Like, they would just go. They would not stick around, and they would move on with their lives, and we would go our merry way. And so as a kid, I never really, I mean, I was outgoing and I had a lot of friends, and I was very happy and talkative and whatever, but I never really formed strong relationships with people, because I just assumed that we would all eventually part ways, one way or the other. And that kind of like followed through with, I switched school districts between elementary and middle school, and then I switched school districts again between middle school and high school. So I never really stayed in one place for very long, and I didn't really have friends for a very long time, and I didn't have siblings that stayed around for super long either. But aside from this one girl that we had living with us for 12 years. We had this one boy come in, and I don't know how long he lived with us for, maybe like a year or so, but he ended up being a bit of a pyromaniac, and he actually burned my house, or my room, not down, but the structure of the house was fine, and everything else in the house was fine, but everything that I owned was gone because he played with matches and then hid them under his pillow. So I never really ended up having a huge attachment to things either. I spent that whole summer sleeping in a tent trailer in my front yard. Yeah, that was not super fun. So, you know, there was that sort of like those building blocks of not mistrust, but just like not wanting to be very close to anybody, including my own family. And, you know, that was when I guess my parents and I started not being as close. I used to really like when I was a kid, if I recall, my mom and I would like have date nights where she would like go deposit a check, and then we would have Del Taco and we'd spend the evening together, or my dad would we'd play video games on his computer, and I would watch him play like Doom or Freddy Farkas and stuff like that. And but I think like after that, you know, when you get older too, like when you start becoming a teenager, you just don't get as close to your parents. But also like when the fire happened and all that other shit, like it's just hard to really trust people after that. So, you know, we ended up moving I went to a different school district, and then we ended up moving. So that was like a double whammy with, you want friends, you don't get friends. As I got older, we moved, and I lost all my friends, which, you know, happens. And my mom started working 2 jobs. She was substitute teaching and working at a gas station, and my dad would substitute teach as well. And like, so, you know, they were working a lot, and didn't get to see them a whole lot. But I also kind of felt like at times maybe, and I don't know if this was conscious on my mom's part or anything like that, but at times I would feel like my foster sister, who was still living with us, she would get a little bit of favorable treatment, and maybe it's because of her circumstances of being a foster child and not having a great start to her life, whereas I was the biological kid, or if it was because my foster sister was more into the things that my mom was, and I was more into like staying indoors and playing video games or whatever. Which my dad was too, but he's not a great communicator. But we drifted apart, and after we moved, maybe a few years later, my foster sister, like, I don't exactly know if she was mentally ill or just unstable or whatever, but after she hit a certain point, she started accusing my parents of abuse. And when you're raised in the foster care system and you get guardianship of a child, I believe the difference between guardianship and adoption is this is your baby, and then guardianship is where they will send a social worker out to your house every year, and they will check on the house and make sure that the kid's living in a stable environment, which seems fine, which is fine and seems completely harmless in theory. But in a way, like every single year that woman came out to our house, it was like another reminder for this girl that she was not with her real family, and like that we weren't her real family, and that her real mom was out there somewhere. And she got in her head this idea that her real mom, who was a drug addict and an alcoholic, loved her more than my parents or us or whatever. So she like had this fantasy in her head where she would like meet her mom, and things would be wonderful and perfect and all this other shit. And whereas she was living in a house where we had like several horses and all this tack and all this shit that my parents had bought for her, and like, you know, it was just really stupid, and obviously it's easy for me to say, but yeah, she ended up hurting herself and accusing my parents of abuse and stuff like that, and she got pulled out of our house, and because of that, you know, there was this period of time where like my parents and I didn't know if I was going to be staying in the house either, and if I was going to be pulled into the foster care system. And it was, I guess they must have determined pretty early on, or relatively early on, that she wasn't telling the truth, because she wasn't. Because, you know, I stayed where I was, but it didn't really matter, because as soon as she was pulled out of the house, my mom was just in hysterics, which is understandable. You know, you raise a kid for 12 years and then she lies her way into getting pulled out of your house, and suddenly this like child that might as well have been yours is gone, and there's nothing there. So I won't say she like took it out on me. She definitely, like, I wasn't beaten or anything, but like there was a lot of emotional duress. My mom was very short-tempered. She wasn't mad at me, obviously, but there was a lot of like, we had fights, like physical fights with each other, or I would, you know, get I mean, I'm not saying I was an angel either. There was a lot of emotions running high on both sides. But either way, like, that whole incident basically I would say, like, put a huge divide between all of us. Because my dad kind of withdrew, and then my mom was very, like, hostile and angry because this horrible thing had happened, and then I was hostile and angry because I was a teenager, and also because my mom was being hostile and angry and all this other stuff, and you kind of feel like you're just surrounded by people who aren't really on your side. And you know, I know that's not true now, but at the time it was a tough pill to swallow. So I was sort of like, I wouldn't say trapped, but, you know, you feel trapped in this house where you're surrounded by people who feel like they're against you, even if they're not. But you know, just when you spend so much time yelling at each other and being angry at each other, even though you're not angry at each other, you're angry at this like separate situation that has nothing to do with you personally. It's hard to walk away from that and have things ever feel like they're okay. And it took a long time, and especially, and when I started getting older too, like, I started really diverging from my parents politically, and you know, I'm personally, my sexuality is a little more flexible, I guess you would say. I'm not really bi or pan. I mean, I'm married, so that's my sexuality now until I get divorced. Woo. But at least in a monogamous relationship. But you know, that also didn't make my mom very happy when she found out about that, and there were just all these things that made dealing with my family and understanding what being part of a family was very difficult for me. So for a long time, like, I kind of felt like I was the only person that I could ever really trust or not relate to, but like talk to or whatever. And things have gotten better in the interim, but I mean, even when I had to live with my parents again, because I broke my knee and I lost my job and got evicted from an apartment that I was renting. When that happened, I had to move back in with my parents, and then I stayed with them until I got married because I was saving money for the wedding. And that was really hard too, because we're just so different. And I know there are a lot of people who are completely different from their parents, and whatever different may mean, like it might mean that, you know, you might not agree politically, or might mean that personality wise you're just complete opposites, or, you know, they're more clean and you're a slob, or you're messy, and or vice versa, or something. There's always something that's going to make dealing with your parents more difficult in a way. And now that I live on my, now that we have our own place and we've been living here on our own for a little bit, and we're making, you know, we're finally making a living, and paying our own bills and stuff like that, and not relying on my parents so much, I'm starting to sort of be able to have an actual relationship with them, as opposed to rely on them. And I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, no matter what situation you're in right now, it'll get better. It's just a matter of time, and it's a matter of trying. Unfortunately, like, if you're stuck in a situation where you're living with somebody who is, you know, with a parent who might not be, I don't want to say physically or emotionally abusive, but is hostile or argumentative, or just so different from you, like, it'll come to an end sooner or later. You will move out. You'll find either people to live with, or you'll find a job that will allow you to pay all your own bills by yourself, or something like that. And there is a way. Things will even out, and you might even find yourself in a situation where you can deal with your parents being different than you, and find a way to be their friend and stuff. And find a way to have a relationship with them, even if it might not feel like what you think a traditional familial relationship would be. There's nothing wrong with needing a bit of distance from your parents, or from your siblings, or from somebody who normally you would expect to be able to confide in, or somebody who you would think that this relationship would have no conditions or limits or boundaries on. But familiar relationships, is almost more important to place those sorts of boundaries, because it's easier for those sorts of relationships to have lines crossed, or to have invasions of, you know, privacy or something like that, without the other person realizing it or intending to. Because those sorts of intimate relationships make it easier for somebody to take advantage of you, even if they don't mean to, or to hurt you, even if they don't mean to. So with all that being said, take some time for yourself, and remind yourself that whatever shit's happening right now, it's all temporary. And things really do change day by day. And with every single time you go to sleep, you'll wake up and something might be different. Something is different. Everything is different every single time you wake up. But something may be different for you personally. And by taking the time to sort of reflect on, you know, what you're good at, or reflect on what sort of relationships you want to have with people, whoever they are, you'll be one step closer to sort of at least finding a bit of peace for that day, or that week, or whatever. Whatever you're having trouble with, I wish you the best of luck, and we'll see you next week. Peace.